Stand on London Bridge today and look upstream. You'll see the Shard cutting into gray sky, hear the low thunder of buses behind you, and catch the distant wail of sirens somewhere in Southwark. The river is wide, calm, and controlled. Nothing here feels ancient. But strip it all back. Peel away the steel and tarmac, pull down 8 centuries of rebuilding, and what you're standing on, this exact ground, was once the edge of a city unlike anything you can picture. Not in its ambition, but in its rawness, its noise, its smell, its violence and beauty and absolute unrelenting density. This is London in 1300, and it is nothing like the city you know. 80,000 people live here, possibly more. Contemporary tax records and parish counts suggest a city that has tripled in size over the previous century and a half. London in 1300 is the largest city in Britain by a wide margin, one of the largest in all of Northern Europe. For a man arriving on foot from the countryside of Norfolk or the hills of Wales, entering London for the first time is like stepping from a quiet room into a roar. The walls still stand. Roman walls first, built nearly 1,000 years before this moment, then repaired and extended by successive rulers who understood that a city worth keeping was a city worth protecting. They describe a rough oval along the north bank of the Thames, from Aldgate in the east to Ludgate in the west. Inside that boundary, the city is packed beyond what modern eyes would recognize as livable. But people don't just live inside the walls, they overflow. Southwark sprawls across the south bank. Suburbs press outward at every gate. The city is expanding, and nothing is slowing it down. Not yet. You do not come to London in 1300 without first encountering the bridge. There is only one. There will be only one permanent crossing of the Thames in London for another 4.5 centuries, and Old London Bridge is far more than a crossing. It is an entire district suspended above the water. Almost 900 feet long, it rests on 19 narrow stone arches supported by massive structures called starlings that grip the riverbed. Those starlings constrict the flow of the Thames so severely that the water surges between them like rapids. Watermen who navigate these passages are skilled professionals. To shoot the bridge, to pass through in a small boat, is considered a genuine feat. Accidents are regular. Deaths are not uncommon. Walk onto the bridge from the northern end, and you are entering a street like any other London street. Shops and houses line both sides, their upper floors jutting outward until they nearly meet above your head. Goldsmiths, butchers, mercers, a chapel to St. Thomas Becket at the midpoint, a sacred anchor in the middle of this strange suspended neighborhood. On the southern gate, there are heads, the tarred and preserved heads of executed traitors displayed on iron spikes looking out towards Southwark. This is not a novelty. It is a deliberate message to anyone arriving from the south. Authority is present here, and it is capable of violence. Pass through the northern gate and move into the interior. Cheapside is the great artery. Its name comes from the Old English cheap, meaning trade, market, bargain, and that is exactly what it is. Running east to west through the city's center, it is the widest street in London. Wide precisely because it has to be. Not a single market, but a succession of them, one merging into the next for hundreds of yards. Poulterers, corn merchants, cloth traders, fishmongers whose stalls carry the whole wet reek of the Thames in miniature. The street moves. Horses pulling heavy carts push through crowds that press to either side. Pigs wander between stalls. Apprentices shout the merits of their master's goods. A group of Franciscan friars moves through in single file, brown habits brushing the mud, faces set against the noise. A fight breaks out somewhere to the east. Nobody stops. Fights are daily. The buildings are timber-framed, 2 and 3 stories high, their upper floors leaning outward over the street. Ground floors are open-fronted. stallboards hinged out to form counters. Above the merchants live their families, their apprentices, sometimes their animals. The line between living space and working space does not exist. Commerce is the breath and blood of every household. At the eastern end of Cheapside stands the Eleanor Cross, erected by King Edward I just 10 years earlier in 1290 to mark the resting places of his late Queen's funeral procession. It is new, ornate, and slightly jarring against the worn chaos around it. Power making itself felt in stone, even here among the poulterers and the candle makers. Looming above the western skyline is old St. Paul's Cathedral. Not the cathedral Christopher Wren will build after the Great Fire, the earlier one, heavier, darker, older. Its spire makes it the tallest structure in London, but it has developed an unexpected second life. Paul's Walk, the long covered nave, has become one of the busiest meeting places in the city. Lawyers meet clients there, merchants discuss deals. Information moves through a cathedral the way it moves through a market. In medieval London, God is infrastructure. Move east, downriver, and the skyline hardens. The Tower of London rises at the city's eastern edge, its white tower visible from the bridge, from the river, from every approach. Built by William the Conqueror after 1066 as a declaration of Norman dominance over a city that had never fully accepted him, it has grown steadily since. Edward I has recently added new outer walls and a redirected moat. The complex is now enormous. The tower in 1300 is many things at once: royal treasury, royal mint, arsenal, and a menagerie. Edward I keeps lions, a polar bear, and an elephant, diplomatic gifts from foreign rulers, caged near the outer walls. Londoners can pay a small fee to see them. And it is a prison. The tower is where people of consequence are kept when they become dangerous, or when someone more powerful decides they are dangerous. Its walls have already absorbed stories that will be told for centuries. They will absorb many more. There is one thing no reconstruction can carry, but that would stop you cold if you could actually be here. London in 1300 does not smell like a city. It smells like a condition. The Thames provides drinking water. It is also the city's primary sewer. The river carries the waste of 80,000 people, the blood of the slaughterhouses at Smithfield, the runoff of the tanneries in Southwark, who use urine and animal dung in their leatherworking processes. The streets are unpaved except on major thoroughfares. Pigs are prohibited from wandering within the city walls. They wander constantly. The phrase common nuisance appears in legal records of this period more than almost any other. You would adapt. Everyone here has adapted so thoroughly that it is visitors from smaller towns who remark on the smell. Londoners themselves seem not to notice. There is one thing no one living in London in 1300 can see, but that we can see now, looking back. 48 years from this moment, in 1348, ships will dock at the southern ports of England carrying rats. On those rats, fleas. In those fleas, Yersinia pestis, the bacterium that becomes the Black Death. The city pressing against its walls, teeming with 80,000 lives, will lose somewhere between a third and a half of those lives in under 2 years. Entire streets will empty. Parish records that had been filling with baptisms will fill instead with burials, and then stop entirely because the priests will be dead too. But that is coming. That is not now. In 1300, London knows only that it is growing, that the bridge is always crowded and the river always busy, and there are never enough hours between sunrise and curfew for all the business that needs doing. It knows the sound of church bells layering across 100 parishes, the smell of bread from the bakers on Bread Street, the way light falls on the Thames in early morning before the city fully awakes. It is a hard place, a loud place, a place where disease is always present and violence always close.
But it is London, already, unmistakably, it is London. And here is the remarkable part. You can still find it. Not the buildings, mostly, gone. Not the smell, thankfully, but the geography. Cheapside is still Cheapside. Lombard Street still carries its name and something of its original function. The Thames still flows where it always flowed, and London Bridge still stands where the Romans first decided to cross. The city rebuilt after the Black Death, rebuilt after the Great Fire, rebuilt after the Blitz. Each time it reached back to the same ground, the same rivers, the same logic of movement and trade that made it worth rebuilding in the first place. Stand on London Bridge today and look down at the water. The city pressing against its banks is running the same calculation it ran in 1300. Who controls the flow controls everything. The names change, the buildings change, the smell, mercifully, has changed considerably, but the logic remains. It always remains.